The following story is also available as a read-only version. Check the link in the description if you're interested.
Willem had seen the outside before. He'd seen it from the command bridge on that beautiful day when his class of officer cadets had visited it. He'd even talked to the captain, the man in charge of making sure the lumberer stayed its course. It had been more stammering on his part, so awestruck was he that the captain would actually exchange a few words with him. Right now, deep below, beneath the creaking struts, jumping coils, singing cables, pumping levers and turning cogs, Willem could see the ground itself, the surface the lumberer walked on to escape the great fire. There was nothing in between him and the outside but moving parts. Not even a sheet of glass separated him from it, only distance. If Willem fell off the narrow beam of steel he was standing on, he would fall right out of the belly of the lumberer and be smashed on the ice-covered rocks below. It was terrifying and fascinating at the same time. Nothing was supposed to fall out of the lumberer. Only the most unusable of garbage, waste materials recycled 100 times, were dumped to be consumed by the great fire. Anything that had any use at all remained aboard. If Willem were to fall, the waste would be unfathomable. He was a young man, healthy and able-bodied, clever and of steady hand. Many resources had been used to train him, more than almost everyone else. He was a junior officer, an assistant under-chief, proud of his red uniform and the respect it commanded. It was made of the smoothest, most insulating fabrics. Only the wealthiest could get clothes this comfortable. Even if Willem could be spared, his uniform could not. A giant pendulum swung by him only an arm's length away. Two clambermen, who had been holding onto its handle, jumped off to a crooked beam above Willem's head. They were shorter than regular people and covered in rust-coloured fur. Clambermen could only be found down here, in the belly of the lumberer. Most people didn't even know they existed. After stopping for a moment to glance at Willem, they leaped, grabbed a hold of a thick cable, and climbed away into the darkness. They understood everything about repairing machines, but were too dull to understand that Willem should not have been here.
"I did not think you would actually come."
The voice was that of an old man or possibly woman, marred by decades of chimney smoke. Willem stumbled backward, almost falling off into the outside. A figure emerged behind a tank he was sure nobody had been behind when he had passed it earlier. The Merchant of Wishes was large, much taller than Willem, even bent over the way he was. Clad in a tattered coat of brown wool, his body and face were shrouded in darkness that not even the dim lantern he was holding in his hand could penetrate. His bare, ashen white feet were larger than Willem's head. "Are you him?" Willem asked. He knew this could be no one else, but he just had to be sure.
"Him who?" the Merchant of Wishes responded. "If by him you mean the man who will take your aspirations and turn them into something immediate, then him you have found."
"What's your name?" Willem asked, not because he wanted to know, but because he suddenly didn't know what to say. The Merchant of Wishes was supposed to be a story, a last resort he had turned to in his desperation. He had already declared himself insane for interpreting the series of metallic beats he'd received in response to his own hammering onto the bedroom wall as a message. The fact that it had been real was more than a little unexpected.
"My name," the Merchant of Wishes chuckled. "I could sell it to you for a price you would be unable to pay. Only a child of the lumberer could make such a ridiculous suggestion."
Willem was confused. There was no one outside the lumberer, so wasn't everyone a child of the lumberer? "I want to become a bridge officer. I was third best in my class, but I was assigned to the foundry instead.
Foundry officers are well respected, are they not? The foundry marshal is the second most powerful man aboard the Lumberer,
the Merchant of Wishes said.
But I want to be captain. When I was a boy, I had a dream that I would be captain, and that dream needs to come true,
Willem insisted.
So your real wish is not to become a bridge officer, but to become captain. There is a difference, you know. Any officer can become captain, such is the law. There have been captains in the past who were foundry officers,
the merchant offered.
That has not happened in over 100 years, Willem protested. It will never happen to me.
I see.
The Merchant of Wishes scratched his own chest. It sounded like metal bolts scraping over sandpaper.
What are you willing to trade for that wish?
Willem paused. He knew such a question was bound to come up, but he simply couldn't imagine what the Merchant of Wishes could desire.
Anything,
he simply said, hoping that the merchant would specify.
Well, that's a bit much, he said. Say I make you captain tomorrow, and in 50 years, when you are old and withered, a day away from your own death, I tell you to turn the Lumberer around and walk it into the great fire. Would you do that?
If he was going to die anyway, and this would have given him the captaincy for an entire lifetime, wasn't it worth it? It would be terrible for sure, but Willem would no longer be alive for that.
Yes, I would do anything.
The Merchant of Wishes nodded.
It is as I thought, then.
He lifted his lamp and fingered around its bottom. It began emitting a bright green light, blinding Willem for a moment. He fell backward onto the cold steel of the beam.
Many young men set on becoming captain choose the path of the bridge officer. Some become desperate and ask me to help them.
The Merchant of Wishes stepped closer. It was as though 1,000 needles pricked out from beneath his skin, boring through it like seedlings through dirt. Willem pulled back his sleeve to find that his arm was now covered in rust-red fur.
You certainly are one of these men, but you do not have what it takes to be a captain.
Willem's back hurt. It was as though he was being pressed forward. Standing up was torturous and took excruciating effort. At the same time, the twilight of the lumberer's belly became bright and its vastness apparent. The sheer extent of it, the intricacy, the beauty of all the machines working together. And suddenly he could comprehend them. Not just the individual pieces of this puzzle, but the whole and the position of every cog in it. Every lever turned, every cable pulled, every flywheel spun. He understood how it all fit together, how it all worked.
The lumberer deserves better than you,
the giant standing in front of Willem said. For a moment he understood the words, but then it was like waking up from a dream, and they became little more than sounds. He heard the whistling of a pipe, not louder, yet somehow more prominent than all the other sounds around. If pressure was not released soon, the pipe would burst, and a chain reaction would begin that could lead to the breakdown of the entire machine. With great urgency, he jumped downward onto a turning lever, then over to a shaking gangway, heading for the right valve to turn.
If you liked this story and would like to hear more, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. A new short story is uploaded every Wednesday, and there will occasionally be another one in between if I find the time. Thank you very much for listening and have a great day.